total ecstasy.
You're on a completely different plane, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, not for sure.
Well, we don't know. We haven't achieved that state. We haven't achieved that state. So do you?
But we've achieved the state of no knowledge, which is
it comes across in this podcast.
yeah.
Going back to the concept of time, then.
What is time?
What is
The
time?
thing is, we're saying like what art
We're acting
does.
like we know what time. Yeah, exactly.
Like art's role in time, and we're talking about like
So
how we relate. But yeah, what is time?
What is actually? Yeah, what is time?
I don't know. Do you have any ideas?
I think if art exists to capture time. Actually, no. So that's all I have on that. What do you think?
So I think basically time, if we're going to look at it, probably can be kind of, at least to speak about it, can be broken down into three elements, three types of time, right?
Okay.
So one is the impermanent.
Yeah.
The other is the ecogenic.
Which is what?
And the third is the human.
So if you were to do examples of all three?
So basically, impermanence is the notion that everything doesn't occur all at once, right? So this moment happens, then this moment happens, this moment happens. Basically, just there's change.
Yeah.
The universe changes, things are in transience, right?
And a constant level of transience, right?
Yeah. I think, the state, I don't know, the speed.
Yeah, but the speed is variable, right?
Yeah, that's another question. But like, okay, let's just say that the impermanence that I'm talking about is like that time is just that things move.
Okay.
Right? And things change.
I think so.
Then the human notion of time is the idea that is like calendars and dates and like all these like very specific clock and stuff, very specific, quite dualistic, deconstructed notions of time. And then the ecogenic kind of lives between these two ideas. So let's say it's ecogenic because it seems like it's actually like founded within nature, but it still is quite possibly prone to human delusion, right? So I like the ideas of the cycles of nature. So the fact that there's night and day, if you just look at things, you observe blackness at a certain part of time, and white lightness at a not sort of part, and another part of time. So then from that we abstract certain things, and then that leads to calendars and all these sort of specific things. So then when you ask the question, is time an illusion? For me, the impermanent time, I find it very hard to refute that to be an illusion. I think that time does exist.
Because everything is changing, right? Everything's moving.
Yeah. I think everything's in constant flux.
Yeah.
It's always,
Yeah. Of course.
And then what I think does come into question, whether it exists or not, is the human notion of time. And then to a lesser extent, we start exploring the ecogenic.
So can one, such as myself, completely disregard the human notion of time and just live in the impermanence?
I think so. It's very hard in today's society, and like with our conditioning and everything, and our logical structures of our brain. But I don't know.
What would be the benefits of me completely disregarding time? Like, it's all very well for me to say that I'm going to do that, but what would be the point?
I guess our listeners would be free of this podcast. Free of this nonsense. You'd be able to resume your lives. I guess you'd never turn up here. Or there, anyway.
Or maybe I'd never leave.
Or maybe you'd never leave. Maybe this would just be an endless podcast.
That would be perfect.
Yeah, for some.
Take turns to sleep.
Okay, yeah, well, I guess...
Yeah, so what would be the benefits of me completely disregarding time? The human notion of time. Or is there no benefit to it?
Well, I think... Well, the benefit... So the thing is, we don't know that is actually a delusion, right?
Yeah,
we're not saying that the human notion of time is actually wrong. What I think is incredible is it's so like amazing that in all our delusion and all the complexness of time, December still feels the same every year.
Very true. Christmas. Right?
Yeah. Well, okay. Apart from like the feeling and the cold is the same, and it's like, how have we actually managed to create a calendar that does function? right? And then we have all these kind of mechanisms to offset things, like leap years and daylight savings and stuff like things. Right? Yeah. Things actually sort of progress in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's not as much of a delusion as we think it is.
I guess that's the question to ponder, but I don't
is
really
it actually a question to ponder?
Well, I mean, there's no question that needs to be pondered, right? But are we here out of necessity?
Oh, that's a completely different question.
Maybe for...
So if we focus on the ecogenic theory, your ecogenic concept of time.
So I think that's quite a maybe sensible way in which to live that balances the two notions of like a contextualization of the impermanent to a degree that is not like psychotic. Right? I feel like the human things that we've the human notion of time is kind of a product of a rationality, and so the real issue is the rationality. So when you say like what are the benefits of me losing the human notion of time, I think really the benefits is like losing a dualistic rationality, and from losing that, a sort of product of that is you losing that human notion of time, right? And the losing of the rationality that creates that very strict notion of time, losing that brings you to a deeper harmony between elements of anything, right?
And you think that's based on, and you've experienced this in practice?
Well, I mean, to some degree, it's like basically when you consider two things to be separate from each other, then we consider them to be opposing, and we we see them against each other.
Rather than complementing each other.
Yeah, rather than complementing each other. And if you don't see such a distinction between two things, then there's like more harmony, naturally. Right?
But is it possible for us to achieve that state? And I think so.
I'm not a historian, but I think there's like primitive cultures that have done that.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I think the ecogenic sort of that way of system is quite, there's a lot of primitive cultures who have noticed cycles in nature, and then they pay attention to the cycles in nature, and they live through them, but probably just because of time. They haven't actually like taken it as far as we have today in our world.
Because our calendars are based on the cycles of nature, right?
Yeah,
they've just been extrapolated to, maybe potentially a ludicrous amount.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's not like a ludicrous amount. Yeah.
Wait, what have we been talking about?
What do you mean?
For the last 21 minutes.
Well, we've been talking about time, so essentially nothing. Yeah. So for me, this time is essentially God.
Time is God.
Yeah. So I think the impermanent, when we're talking about the impermanent type of time, impermanent level of time.
So in art, you're trying to capture time, but time is God. So you're trying to capture God with your art?
No, become God.
You're trying to become God?
Become one with God.
Become one with God, because God is flowing through you.
Yeah.
That is a very effective summary of what we've just discussed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But that makes sense?
Maybe when I play this podcast back, it won't make any sense. But I think right now it does make a lot of sense. Do you think it makes sense?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Should we stop there?
As much sense as like... If it makes too much sense, then it doesn't actually make real sense, because
no, but the fact that
it's just becoming logical and not actually visceral.
So the fact that it makes no sense makes perfect sense.
Yeah, of course.
That's the rule. That's the rule. And we should stop at that point.
Yeah, and do some washing up.